Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nikita and I'm full-time psychotherapist in Toronto. And on this channel we chat about diversity and inclusion of BIPOC, especially South Asian stories, both in books and literature and in real life. So you can expect to see a lot of book reviews, book recommendations, as well as my podcast called Brown People Problems. So for today's video, I wanted to talk about 3 top books, and in my opinion, that are probably some of the most unique, written by women of color authors. And the very first one for this pick is a nonfiction book called Girls That Invest. This is a book by Simran Kaur, who is a young South Asian Sikh woman living in New Zealand. And she has a podcast by the same name. Check it out, it's really great. Like the name suggests, this is a book filled with some really lovely information on like financial literacy, how the financial markets work, what is investing, what is the stock market, all of that good stuff. But what really makes it so unique for me is, well, so many things, but the first thing that makes this book so unique to me is that I personally have not come across many books about the financial markets that aren't dry. So I don't know if a lot of you may feel similarly, but I find that whatever information is available out there on financial markets and how it works tends to be really dry and really boring and not at all interesting and just really unnecessarily complicated. This book really simplifies it, takes these really sort of seemingly intimidating concepts and breaks them down in a way that is just so simple to understand. I'm not going to speak for everyone, but for me, for a very long time, anything about finances, financial markets just felt extremely intimidating. The language around it was so dense, and these concepts just seemed so big and complex. Simran does a great job of stripping all of the faff away and simplifying even some of the most complex concepts in like really simple words. And it really kind of makes you think about how perhaps some of this information has been purposefully designed to be so complex, so to keep certain groups of people away from accessing this information and using it to grow their wealth. And she makes a good argument of that in the book too. As you can see, I've really kind of marked a lot of important passages. I have highlighted it a lot. I have circled it. I have written notes in a lot of places. But it's really great. So if you're looking to solidify your knowledge and understanding of the investing world, this would be a really great pick. What makes it even more of a unique read for me, to be honest, is a couple of the very first chapters. Simran does a very, very lovely job to dedicate a portion of this book to talking about why this is so complex for a lot of women to navigate. What are some of the institutional, structural, cultural barriers that are in place from keeping women from accessing this information, or that continue to hinder us from accessing and implementing on a lot of this information. She does a great job talking about the culture of shame surrounding discussion of money, intergenerational learnings, traditional gender roles, especially in South Asian communities, and how, or a lot of other collectivist cultures, and how talking about financial markets or finances is not something that girls are encouraged to do, and it seems to be a topic solely reserved for the boys. She really talks about how, developmentally speaking, most men, most boys are raised to take risks and to enhance their confidence by taking risks, whereas women are raised to be a little bit more risk averse. So she really takes all of that into account, because our relationship with money is not independent of the context in which we were raised, whether it's our socioeconomic status, our family dynamics, our cultural learnings, gender norms. So this does a really good job of capturing all of that. Again, a really lovely nonfiction book that is really empowering, really engaging, and just feels amazing to read. Oh, and another part that I loved about this book actually that was so validating is usually, when you read nonfiction, there is, whenever they're wanting to give examples of individuals, there's a lot of white names, a lot of Eurocentric names. But in this book, it was so lovely to see as she was using examples. She would give examples with people who had non-white names. So you had Priya is, looking to open a lemonade stand. And I know this sounds really mundane, but just the mention and inclusion of brown names in a book used as examples just was so gratifying. You really feel seen and you really feel spoken to when a text is inclusive. So thank you, Simran. This is great. The next book I have here is called Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Bali Kaur Jaswal. Interesting name. I won't lie, when I first saw this in store, I was very curious, but not curious enough to pick it up. I just kind of dismissed it, which was my loss. But it's a really interesting name. And this is an even more interesting book. Again, this is a story. What makes it so unique for me is just this concept around helping women explore their sexuality and sexual fantasies in a really unique way. So the story follows our female protagonist, Nikki, who is a British Sikh woman living in England, and it really kind of focuses on the Southall community. And she really identifies with a lot of Western values and is maybe a little bit distanced from her own cultural values. And she is in between jobs. So she finds herself temporarily taking a job in a local Gurdwara, which is a Sikh temple, to teach English to women. Now, what ends up happening is it's not English that they're learning. Eventually, they come around to writing and discussing erotic stories. And how that eventually happens is, I believe, one of the widows in the group finds a book of erotica and she shares it with everyone. And that really opens the door for all of the other women in the group to really share their own fantasies and their own memories around sexuality. And it really shows how, even though a lot of these women may seem very sort of traditional from the outside and they may uphold a lot of traditional values, they also need a space to talk about some of their own deepest desires and some of their fantasies. So Nikki works towards helping these women liberate themselves through expression of their untold stories. And it's a really beautiful story of community, of female empowerment, and of culture and community. And like you can imagine, this is erotic stories, right, that they're kind of writing about in a religious place. So there's a lot of kind of like intrigue around it. There is a lot of afraid of getting caught, obviously, so there's a lot of secrecy around it as well. But again, I think that just speaks to the larger context of the culture and how we respond to women sharing their stories. So this was a very lovely, very unique story, very, very, very fun to read with a huge social message. So I would encourage anyone to pick this up. This was great. And lastly, the book that I have here on my list of top 3 very unique stories by women of color authors is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I am sure you have seen this by now. This book is everywhere, and frankly, I am still in the process of reading it. I have not finished it, but I just love it so much that I wanted to share it. This book follows the story of a young Chinese boy who has been orphaned and has been taken from his home and his village in China and brought to England by this really mysterious man who is a professor at Oxford University, who really sets the boy up for academic success and really adopts him. And while on the surface that can seem really kind of generous and helpful, there's a really dark element here of the effects of colonialism. So this is in essence a fantasy novel that takes place in the very real existing Oxford University, but there is a dark academia part of it, which is this fictionalized tower called Babel, which is, the way I understand it, is sort of a translation institute where texts and manuscripts from all over the world come to Babel, and there's a team of diverse students and there's a diverse workforce that works on translating these into English. And note that nothing is ever translated from English into other languages, which is a whole different narrative of how colonialism worked. But everything is translated into English, and this is what our main character is being primed for. When he gets to Oxford University, he initially is really feeling at home. He feels really kind of seen, and valued, but he starts to kind of get familiar with some of these dark practices of colonialism. And what follows is, I think, his sort of battle between staying true to his cultural roots and his motherland while navigating this society of privilege that he's been given. There's a fantasy element to this as well. So that's what I really loved about it, where she was able to kind of merge a very heavy topic with something fantastical to help add more layers of complexity to it. What I love most about this book so far is it paints a really accurate picture of colonialism, from him being taken from his home and his village, to his name being changed to a white name, to him losing touch with his cultural roots, to him forgetting his language, to him working for an institution that is trying to replicate and support colonialism and the imperial empire. So again, like I said, I'm still 25% through it, but I love it so much. I have really kind of, I don't know if you can see, I like dog-eared a few pages. Sorry if it offends anyone, but this is just such a great book. And it's a really, really unique story of how insidious and invisible sometimes the impacts of colonialism can be, and what it looks like to stand up for that. So that's it, everyone. Those were my 3 books that I found to be most unique so far, and not an exhaustive list, but most unique stories by women of color authors. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. I will obviously link all of these down below, and I will see you next time.